I call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Good evening, and welcome to our second Customer Advisory Committee meeting for the meter replacement program. Laura, could you give a review and introduction, please?
Okay, welcome. So glad to have you here tonight. Let's look at the agenda and get a sense of what it is that we are doing, and we're so happy to have you all here. Again, we'll be looking at the meter replacement program, and so David Gordon will be giving a recap of the entire program for all of you. And Jenna will be then talking about the importance and the significant role that you play in the process. We'll be looking at how Citrus Heights uses water meters. And then Eric Vaughn will be giving an overview of Phase 2. So the district and the consortium have been in the middle of Phase 1, and so you'll get a heads up on what Phase 2 is looking like. After each of those presentations, we're going to ask you to get into some small groups and come up with any questions you have. We'll stick those up on the flip charts like we've done before, and then after the break, we'll come back and all of your experts will answer your questions. And then David will go through looking at how the district moves forward as this process is continuing, and your next CAC meeting is going to be in June, so it'll give you background of what will happen until June. So that's the plan, that's the agenda.
Thank you very much, Laura, and I'll echo. Thank you all for coming tonight. It seems like we've competed with the rainiest nights. Tonight we're competing with like the nicest night. And so thank you for foregoing your cocktail on the patio for some lemonade and cookies here tonight. At this time, we'll open the public comment period for items that are not on the agenda. Members of the public can make a comment for up to 3 minutes on any item that does not appear on the agenda. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak tonight?
Given my volume of voice, I probably better lower it now, right? Okay, my name is Peg Pinard, and I have been I've previously been a member of this committee, but also have been following what you've been doing, and I have been waiting for the meter replacement program to come up to be able to give some very specific input. My concern is that this is one of those efforts that, why wouldn't you want it? It's new, it's modern, everybody's got all the data that they could possibly want. However, it is a computer, and I think you need to remember that, and it's going to have all the downfalls of what we already experience as computers. You've got a hard drive that will become obsolete, and by the way, there's built-in obsolescence to these mechanisms. This is a worldwide investment that's going on, and these people who are investing in these, while there are all kinds of attractions, you can have all this data, you can be up to the minute on everything, the reality is that there is a cost to this. And that cost is going to be ongoing. Right now, all of the data that you receive kind of talks about a 15 to 20 year lifespan. That is not the data that is what we've learned from the industry. One of your members last time asked if we could just go back to the old simple style meter rather than advanced technologies. And I think what we need to do is remember that there was a lot of reliability with the old type of equipment. And I say old, but they're not old. They improve as well. This is going down a path that once you go down it, there is no return. You will have, as other communities have already learned, who have put in the first generation of smart meters, they've already replaced the second generation. There is a limited life to this, generally believed by the industry themselves, to be between 5 and 7 years. Not 15, and definitely not 20. There has been testimony before the House Congressional Committees. Mr. Bennett Gaines testified on behalf of the First Emergency Services Company. He's the Senior Vice President in Corporate Services. He says these devices are now computers, and so they have to be maintained. They don't have the life of an existing meter, which is 20 to 30 years. These devices have a life of between 5 and 7. Now, that was testimony before Congress. I'm not making this up. And there are many instances where people have finally come forward and admitted to what the actual life is. So while you're making cost estimates based on 15 or 20 years, realize that's not reality. That's not what other communities are experiencing. And you have this situation now where you're asking people to pay for pipe replacements. That absolutely has to be done. That was probably the hardest part of what you needed to do and what people are going to be facing when you give them what their rate increases are in order to pay for it. Now you have a potential for really a system that is not absolutely necessary and required. And I would say that you need to keep in mind that
About
right
1
now
minute to wrap up.
I will. Right now, there are subsidies that some government agencies are putting out there for you. It's kind of like Kodak used to give out cameras because they would get you on the film. There are subsidies now, but in 5 to 7 years, when you need to replace it, they're not going to be there. So when you do any kind of cost analysis and get this information from your staff, you need to be marking this all along the way. And I had one other comment to make, and that is that, oh, geez. This is one of the problems of getting older is when you, and didn't write out a speech. I just wanted to really implore you to look at this, that the real numbers are quite different, and every analysis that I saw, which is a cost-benefit analysis, came back being more of a promo for the meters rather than an actual, this is what it costs after 5 years, this is what it costs after 10 years, and these are the kinds of expenses we're going to be having. I would urge you, please, to question everything that is before you and do not take any of it on the newer, better, greater, everybody else is doing it kind of mentality. All right, thank you.
Thank you for bringing to prominence, Peg, the, I think, an appropriate level of skepticism in all of the documents that we're going to read promoting a certain type of meter. Thank you. It's 6:39. I see no other members of the public to make a comment. I'll close the hearing at 6:39. At this time, I do not see that we have a quorum to approve minutes. Should we establish a quorum before the close of our meeting tonight, we can revisit that particular item. At this time, it brings us to the meter replacement program recap, led by David Gordon.
Thank you, and welcome. Thank you for taking time. I know it's been several months since we last met, so I'm going to kind of give us a little bit of a breakdown of where we are today and where we are with the study and where we're going to be going with the study. So to begin with this study, it started out as an individual agency approach where we were looking at this saying, okay, we put in these meters less than 20 years ago, but we need to look at, okay, this is an ongoing asset management system that we need to look at as an ongoing basis, and we were really gathering our strength of just understanding our own system when we first put these things in. But now we need to look at it as, how do we look at this ongoing? How do we fund it ongoing, and where do we want to be? So we really sat down with our board and worked this out as a strategic planning item. Then we started talking to the other agencies around us, and the other agencies started having the same questions and comments that we had regarding their own programs. And one thing led to another, and they became a multi-agency approach to this meter replacement study. And now we have 12 member agencies that are involved in various forms of the study and looking at how to do this individually as well as how to do this together. So looking into the study, there are 7 phases to the study. The 7th being public outreach strategy is what we have here today, as well as how do we reach public outreach after this study and after this group meets. But the first phase of the study is about assessing all of the meters from each agency and doing this in a consistent manner. So we have concluded this portion, but as we go through the different phases, some of this stuff might be risen to the surface. So we might have to go back and revisit some of that information that an agency just did not know at that time. And so we're not really closing the book on these phases because some of the information, some of the agencies just didn't know offhand at that time. And then we are going to be talking about this next generation, which is the next meter technology that there was a comment on just a minute ago. And Eric's going to expand on this next technology. And just to kind of reiterate that the benefits of what we're seeing with the consortium on this so far is that the technical folks, the boots on the ground, are the ones that are providing this input to our group of saying what works and what does not work. And every agency has installed meters, but slightly different brands, slightly different technologies. And so from that, we're using not necessarily what the vendor's telling us, but what is actually working, and to validate what they're actually saying on paper and what's actually being done in the field. Then we're also working on this meter testing program. So we've already started this phase of the study, which goes in parallel a little bit with this meter technology portion of phase 2. And then we move into the implementation and funding strategy of, what are we going to do and how are we going to fund it. And if we look at the phases as building blocks, you can remember this graphic from Project 2030. We really liked it, so we felt like we should bring it back. I know this thing's not working, but really the phase 1, 2, and 3 are informational gathering portions to this study, and this really acts as the foundation or building blocks to the next phases of what to do and how to fund it. So assessing what the agencies have specifically, or what's available out there as the consortium has installed. What are these new technologies? Where is an agency going and where do they want to go? And then how to assess these meters moving forward. What is the health of them? And developing a long-range testing program based off of, for each individual agency, as well as what are the benefits of doing testing, as a consortium. Several of the agencies have invested enormous amounts of money into testing facilities. And Rebecca Scott will be covering a little bit of a recap of some of our recent testing for you to tell you where we are right now. And so that's really important information, but it's really important that we have something that's ongoing. So we are consistently, taking these meters to the doctor and finding out, okay, well, how healthy are you? And where are we going with that? Looking at the schedule, as you can tell, working with 12 agencies can make schedules bleed out longer than we wanted, but also they can also disrupt schedules from time to time as well. We've noticed that so far. So the phase 1 and phase 2 have extended out slightly, but phase 3 has started on time, so we hope to get right back on schedule from that. So I just wanted to let you know where we are with that. We scheduled a June meeting, for the CAC to gather information on meter testing, as well as, looking into the implementation portion of the phase and understanding where that is going. And then we finish with several different meetings, CAC meetings to discuss these funding strategies, and really get the big input from, you, the customers. So, thank you.
Thank you, David. So now we'll turn it back over to Jenna to talk about the role of the CAC.
Thank you, Laura. And thanks for the opportunity to just talk to you guys for a second about the role of the CAC. We've been through this process for almost 2 years. It's been, the same group of faces that I'm seeing every couple of months, and I'd like to express my appreciation for you hanging through a 2-year process. I'm also asking for your help because the Water District needs help. There's not a particular message that the community is hearing from the district right now, but I think it would be helpful for our kind of close-knit group that we have here to potentially be truth advocates when it comes to discussing water district matters. There's not really an agenda or anything that I have scripted for you to say, but you've been here and you understand it. Just be the truth. And try to spread that advocacy when you have a natural opportunity to do so. Our job here is really to gain knowledge about the meter process. That's our next goal. And I hope you'll continue to be dedicated to expanding your knowledge in that area. Being able to communicate the reasonable expectations of the district to customers and be that truth teller. I would encourage you to do so, and that's the kind of help that the district needs right now. Thank you, and I hope that you'll continue your dedication.
So let's keep going, and we'll hear from Rebecca Scott, and she works very closely with David Gordon, and she'll be talking about how the district utilizes water meters.
All right, so many of you, well actually all of you were here for the Project 2030 study, and that was talking about water mains and our other larger infrastructure components, and all of that is underground, and so you don't see it every day. Maybe if you happen upon one of our construction projects, you might see a water main being placed, but in general, it's not seen. In contrast, water meters are a reminder of your water district that you typically would see every day because they're usually close to the street and outside your home near where you are. And most of our water meters are located near the street, but the location of the district's meters are sometimes spread out. They could be, near sidewalks, some are even in backyards, and then sometimes we've got across ditches in more rural spread out areas. And so there could be a variety of locations that those water meters are placed. And when we're looking at new technology options for water meters, we do have to keep that into consideration because we need to look at technology that can cover all of these areas and the meters in all of those various locations. And so if you look at the diagram above, some people might ask, what's my responsibility versus what's the district's responsibility? And for 99% of our customers, the district is in charge of the meter, which you see there in the middle underground, all the way to the water main, which we talked about in Project 2030. And then from the other side of the meter to the house is typically what is the resident's responsibility. And when we built the water system here in the district, the valve near the street, which connects to the water main, was kind of the demarcation line for what was residents' property and what was the district's property. And so once you hit the property line outside of the right-of-way, customers might have, irrigation lines and things like that. So that's why we wouldn't be moving water meters closer to the homes. So we talked about this briefly at the last meeting, but mainly the reason why we use meters is because, number one, it's a federal and state requirement. So that's pretty much right there why we've got them. But aside from that, it also helps just to know our demand. If we know how much water is flowing through our meters, then we always can ensure we have an adequate supply of water to provide to our customers as well. In addition, it creates fairness and equity with our billing because you're billed based on usage. If you use more water, then you pay more of a bill. And water loss is also a big thing with water meters as well. The state right now is putting pressure on water districts to identify water losses down to a very finite level. So as we move forward, it's going to be imperative to improve our accuracy in calculating exactly how much water we're losing every month and year, et cetera. So here we have the two main types of meters, which are mechanical meters, which just means that it has moving parts. And there are also non-mechanical meters, which don't have moving parts, but they just use things like sound or electrical current to measure the flow of water going through them. And meters are chosen primarily for their application. Like, for example, here in the district, if we're putting a meter in a park, we would use a meter that's appropriate to install like a large flow of water for irrigation, whereas in a residential area, our typical meter size is a 1-inch meter for those uses. And so we do complete a lot of analysis and calculation for the volume of water in estimating that to decide what kind of size meter to put in a location that's not a residential area. And all meters have pros and cons, which again is part of the study, so we can learn more about all of these different options. So here in the district, we use two brands of mechanical meters. We use Neptune right there on the left and also Census meters on the right. When we installed meters in the 2000s, mechanical meters were basically the proven technology. It was the industry standard and it was what everybody was putting in the ground. So for us, we chose these two brands and thought that in addition to just not having a lot of brands, different types in the ground, it's important to have consistency. So if we can, obtain parts and repair meters, we're only having, 1 or 2 toolkits with us rather than 5 different toolkits, if we had a variety of different meters installed here. And as the industry has evolved, the manufacturers have been testing different technologies, different features and materials to increase operational and cost efficiency. However, with that, some have not worked so well. Obviously, there have been failures of new technology options, and so that requires an increased cost to replace if you have one of those issues. And again, that's the beauty of the study, is we get to learn all of that information before we put any of these things in the ground. So just looking back at the chart of the meters the consortium has, you'll see that there are a variety of different types of meters that the consortium agencies have, and they also use different meter reading platforms. And some of them have a variety of different brands just because they might have had successes and failures in certain types of water meters. And then in addition, when they're bound to the public bidding process, they have to choose the low bidder of meter. And so sometimes if you're choosing the low bidder, you might have to sacrifice quality because sometimes the cheapest meter might not be the better meter. So for many of these brands, as you can see here, there's really only like 5 main brands that we share in the consortium, but the meter body themselves are very similar, but they just have different nuances, materials, and sometimes features. And so as we work with the technical group, which Eric will describe in more detail, we're capturing these nuances and figuring out which ones are good and bad. So here we have the different meter reading platforms available. There are 3 main meter reading platforms. You have touch read, which is just, as it sounds, where they can just touch a meter reading wand to the lid of a meter box. There's also drive-by reading, where the signal goes from the meter box to the vehicle driving by, but it requires, a pretty close range. And then there's also an automated option, which is transmitted wirelessly. And so that would be, the signal would reach a broader area and it would not require personnel to go out there and read the meter or be in a car near it. So we read meters using 2 of those options. We have touch read meters and also drive-by. And for our water meters, we do bi-monthly reading and we have a bi-monthly billing cycle, as you all know. The average age by size for our district's meters, you can see there we have a variety of sizes. Those larger sizes to the right of the 1-inch are typically our construction and industrial meters. And the 1-inch, again, is the standard size for residential meters, and you'll see that 80% of our meters are those 1-inch meters. Here's a chart with the age of the consortium's meters. So you'll see that with the exception of the San Juan Water District, we do have the oldest meters in the group. And again, that's mostly because we were fully metered by the late 2000s, and a lot of these other agencies were still installing meters after that. And so when we are, and you'll notice also that we have more than 300,000 meters that are part of this study. So the beauty of that is that we can look at each other's pricing structures and look into the potential to work with some of these consortium agencies to leverage these quantities to achieve economies of scale through a potential bulk purchase of meters. So the district recently conducted a randomized sampling of meters, and we tested them in 2018 and 2019. So we chose residential meters that were installed in a variety of different years so that we had a good kind of sample group to choose from. You know, we had some older ones, some newer ones, and some in the middle just to make sure we were testing kind of everything we had. And small meters we removed to test because of their size and their accessibility, and then large meters we can test in place. And so the great thing about the meter testing was that we found our residential meters are performing extremely well, which is great because some of them are, 20 plus years old, and that they are well within American Waterworks Association standards. And the American Waterworks Association develops best practices for the water industry, so they're coming up with our specifications for pipe installations, repairs, anything to do with water meters, water quality, and all of those things. So we were very happy to see that our meters were testing so well. And so what we hope to gain from this study, which David will talk about later, is a more robust testing program with, suggested schedules and ultimately a long-term replacement plan. And so now I will turn it over to Eric Vaughn with Harrison Associates. He's our project manager for the water meter replacement program.
For Eric, before you start, there's a lot of data to absorb. So how about if we just take 5 minutes and you get into some smaller groups so we could have the 3 there, and then James, if you could get together with Rick and Jenna, and you've got the Post-it notes and some pens. If you could just write out any questions on this part, then Eric will talk about phase 2, but I think if we wait till the end, it's just an awful lot to absorb. So how about any questions you have, if you would put each one on a Post-it note, we'll gather those. We won't answer those until after the break, but we'll gather them now. So let's take 5 minutes.
Just since 6 o'clock, flights to Europe canceled for 30 days.
So let's keep going. Thank you for all the questions, and we'll answer these and other questions after the break. But Eric has indicated that he also is very open. If you have any questions along the way as he's talking, if there's a question of clarification, something you would be helpful to know that answer right then to be able to continue to absorb the rest of the presentation, that would be fine. So just let us know if you have a question. Otherwise, at the end of his presentation, again, you'll go back into the small groups and we'll get more questions.
Okay, are we ready?
Ready?
Everyone can hear me, more or less? Is that better? Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to provide an overview of the second phase of the study. And the second phase of the study, as David mentioned, is in this data collection period of the study. And this data collection is focused on what are the options that are currently available in the market. So these are proven technologies, these are deployed technologies. Some of them are newer than others, and we'll talk about that. And then what are the trends in technologies? So what's coming? What's maybe not going to be the thing that is ready now for deployment, but where are things headed? Just to give districts like Citrus Heights a good idea of sort of where the trajectories are. So this included both looking at sort of the types of technologies, but then also what are the versions of those technologies that are available through different vendors? Because I think as Rebecca or David said, they'll all sell a particular technology, but it'll be slightly different. They'll be their version of it. Oh, that is working. Okay, cool. Okay, so the mechanical meter, there's really two types of mechanical meters. The first one is the one on the left. That's called a positive displacement meter. So this technology was invented in 1820, 1830, started to be commercialized in 1850s. It's been around for a long time. It's been improved over the years. This is essentially how it works. It looks like Saturn kind of spinning around its axis. And as it does so, water moves through the meter, and it's able to count that based on, as you can see, there's a counter up at the top, and it's counting cycles. Faster it goes, more units it's collecting. The other type of, so positive displacement meters are common at the smaller meter sizes. So for homes, residential homes, 1 inch below, so 1.5 inch meters, maybe 2 inch meters, you'll see these positive displacement technologies. When you get to the larger sizes, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, and up, you'll see more of these turbine meters. So this is the same thing as a jet engine, essentially. This is the same kind of idea, which is as water flows through the meter, it turns the rotor, and then it's recording based on the revolutions. Again, it's a really well-established technology. It's been around for a long time. So this is the other type of meter. Rebecca talked about there being different kinds of meters for different applications. So with the larger meters, sometimes with larger meters, there will be actually 2 meters on the meter. One side, so they're called compound meters. And one side will have positive displacement, so it'll be measuring the smaller flows. And then for the larger flows, it'll trigger a switch to shift over to a turbine meter to capture the larger flows. So that's established technology. They're deployed here in Citrus Heights. You'll see them in other places around in the consortium. And then now there's newer technologies that are replacing that. Okay, so this is an example of a non-mechanical, steady state, no moving parts. There's different names for them, but essentially what connects them all together is that there's no moving parts. So why is that advantageous? Well, the primary reason is without moving parts, there's less pressure loss. So anytime you've got something, if you looked back at these, you can envision lots of different ways of friction, introduction of friction into the movement of the fluid through it. So there's all sorts of ways to reduce pressure, and that reduces the performance. So with steady state meters, there's nothing blocking the flow. And I know that's, there's Greek in there, there's geometry in there, but I mean the general principle is the term sound carries. So this is an ultrasonic meter, which means it's using sound waves to estimate the flow through it. So essentially, sound moves faster with the wind, right? And it moves slower against the wind. So when fluid is flowing through the meter, it's measuring the time it takes for sound to go from one of these transducers, which emits and receives signal, to the other, sound waves. And based on how long it takes, if the water's moving faster, it takes longer, it just does a calculation and it estimates the flow rate going through it. So they validate each meter to determine, the precise measurement, and then that's how it works. There's another type, electromagnetic meter, uses a different principle, but it's the same kind of thing. It's doing a calculation. So if you're ever curious, you look down on your street and you see a water meter lid, and you're curious what's going on under there. This is essentially what you're looking at. The essential components are, first of all, the meter, the thing that's, it's the water's moving through it. The register is a really important part of a meter. The register is a thing that translates the flow into some kind of count, a unit count. And modern registers, so the historic, the original registers were analog, in that there was a mechanical counter. And you've all seen the dials. There's the digit dials, and it would count and click forward, and you could read the change. So modern meters are digital, And these digital registers have been around for a long, long time. And so the register takes that count and it translates it into a digital signal. And then where's it go? So then it can either be read on the LCD, or there's wires coming out of a modern register, which goes to a transmitter. And there's different options for transmitting that signal, and we'll cover them. And Rebecca already touched on them a little bit. So that's essentially the parts. There's the water line that's going into your house. There's the meter, the register on it, and then the modern register is digital, and the signal goes to a transmitter, which is sitting there on the surface of the lid. Okay, so thinking about the differences between these essentially two types of meters, the mechanical and the non-mechanical. First of all, you've got how long they've been around. So mechanical meters have, as I said, been around since the early 1800s. The technology for solid state or non-mechanical meters have been around for a while. People have understood how to identify flow via ultrasonic waves or electromagnetic energy, but they haven't been commercialized until very recently. So for this application, moving parts. If you have moving parts, there's more potential ways to fail. Also, over time, a meter with moving parts will degrade in performance. These are proven, so depending on water quality and other factors, positive displacement meters have been known to survive over 20 years, 25 years, even 30 years. It's just really depending on so many different kinds of factors. So battery life, right? The old mechanical meters didn't have battery. The registers that are creating a digital message from the register do have batteries. Now this technology is already in use in Citrus Heights and everywhere else, and it's the way that the touch read works. We'll get to the meter reading, but essentially the meters are already digital in that the registers are digital. With the mechanical meter or the non-mechanical meter, since there's calculations going on inside, electronics is required. So there are additional electronic components inside the meter that allow it to take those measurements, to transmit the sound waves, to create an electromagnetic signal so it can register flow. And in terms of accuracy, so this is one of the biggest differences. While mechanical meters have been proven and have been around for a while, there's always been an acknowledgement that their performance drops. There are these curves that show performance over different flow rates, how fast water is moving through a meter, how much volume is moving through a meter. Well, mechanical meters will degrade slightly as there's less and less flow. So they have a larger range of error and accuracy at the lower flows. Well, the solid-state meters or the non-mechanical meters don't have that drop in performance, so they capture low flows more accurately. Yeah, Ray.
What's your definition of low flow and high flow?
There are AWWA, American Water Works Association standards for low flow, nominal flow, and high flow, and they depend on the diameter of the meter. I didn't memorize the table, but I think, for example, a 1-inch meter low flow rate is
I think it's
3/4.
Yeah, I think it's 3/8 of a gallon. Is that correct, Mr. Drake? So that's a low flow, and they're starting to look at ultra low flow these days, which is
1/8 of a gallon
which we
Per
think
minute.
is
per minute.
going a little too beyond the flow of measurement.
There are standards. I'm happy to share them with you if you're interested. Yeah.
And please be sure to push the button and speak into your microphone so that it gets recorded. Thank you.
Yeah, Suzanne.
Since most of us are on household meters, and that's the majority, so what is a typical household use? Does it actually impact us that it's less accurate? I mean, is it frequent? household levels to have low flows, high flows? What are we talking about?
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer for you. There have been studies that have been done. I know that there was a study done in with Washington D.C.'s water utility to try and understand. So there's a standard. Again, so AWWA is the body that creates a lot of the standards that Citrus Heights and other water utilities rely upon to understand their quality of service, their level of service. And there are standards for a household, the ratio of use at a household between low, medium, and high. And I think it's 15% of total flow, of total volume use is predicted to be low flow, 70% nominal, 15% high. That sounds right. Okay. And I think that's changing. There's a new revision of the M6 manual coming out soon, and that'll be changing. But that's the general standard.
So as we talk more about water restrictions, et cetera, and I'm a single person household, I try to be really quite diligent, and I'm not home a lot. So does that mean that then my water meter is going to be less accurate because I'm not using water? I don't imagine that it flows very much through if I'm not using anything.
Yeah, I like the way you're thinking. That's the right way to think about it. It's a possibility. The other thing a district needs to look at is to consider how its water rates. So how much revenue are we really talking about at low flow? Like how much does it really make a difference? So that's something else that we'll look at. But yeah, David.
You know, I know it says that it's less accurate at low flows, but just to be clear at what less accurate is, we're talking about maybe 2 percentage points difference. So, you know, the industry looks at this a little bit differently as far as, you know, touting how accurate they are. So if you're 2 percentage points off, but you're measuring these higher nominal flows more accurately with these mechanical meters, you know, one can argue that it's a better meter. So, you know, it hasn't been completely proven that these non-mechanical meters are actually a lot more accurate in totality of all of these different flows. They're just really focusing on these ultra-low flows and really, really focusing in on water efficiency, items on your sprinkler system or your showers, and really capturing any type of loss that comes through something that's really, really small, which is, you know, what we should always be striving for, but it's not a big difference of performance of that meter. So when we were saying that our mechanical meters were measuring very accurately, it is, you know, at 100%, essentially. Those meters, when we flowed them and tested them, that they were testing at 100%. You know, we're talking about a 22-year-old meter that's still measuring at that. So, you know, that a lot of this is just what the industry through various types of testing has come out with. But, you know, I think that, you know, it's always going to be evolving, through the years of proven versus unproven type of material.
It sounded to me like the return for investing in a product that would give you very accurate low flows was kind of like you wouldn't get return for that 2% of inaccuracy, so it didn't make sense.
We're going to try and break that down a little bit for the study to make sure we understand it, because return on investment is obviously one of the most important factors we'll be looking at. So it's possible to do, you know, to try and understand, you know, if we can expect this % improvement in accuracy, and that translates to this change in revenue, does the additional cost that may be associated with that meter balance with that or not? But I think you raise an interesting point, and something I've thought about, which is that over time, homes have become more efficient, and we're all, those of us that are thoughtful about it are trying to employ more efficient fixtures. Toilets have become much more efficient than they used to be. So, drip irrigation for those that are really into it. So, yeah, I think that's an interesting point. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on. So many more interesting things to talk about. Okay. So Rebecca touched on meter reading, but this has been the evolution. So way back, manual days, they actually had to read meters with their eyes and write something down on a piece of paper. Can you believe it? The sort of where Citrus Heights is at now is they have a large amount of their meters are on touch read systems, which is a digital system. And so I have a photo, but and then the next evolution would be what's called automated meter reading, AMR, and that's the drive-by model. So a vehicle drives by very slowly, as Rebecca pointed out, and the signals sent by the meters that as it drives by, it gets the signal from the meters that are in proximity. And then the automated meter infrastructure, which is sometimes what you hear as smart meters, that's just essentially the same technology as your cell phone. It's a radio frequency signal that's sent out and captured by a collector that's located up high on a tower or something like that. This is how it was done back in the day, back in the 1800s. No, maybe 30 or 40 years ago. So someone would go, and they might not have necessarily. I guess they did have to open it up to look at it. Yeah, that was David.
We still have some meters that we do this.
Okay, there aren't many left, but there are.
Those are our large meters that we want to double check.
Sure. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay. Touch read is with an instrument, and for those who were here at the last meeting, I believe that some people may have been able to even do it with the instrument, so that was cool. Okay, drive by. Rebecca already showed you this, so I won't repeat it. Okay, and so this is advanced metering, and there are several consortium partners that have adopted this as a meter reading platform. I'll talk about the sort of different versions of this. Actually, this is the first version. So in the first version, the district buys the hardware to do this. So they'll buy a certain number of these gateways. That's the thing in the center. And the gateway will be located. There will be gateways located throughout the service area, and the gateway will collect on a regular basis. Could be hourly, could be daily, whatever the frequency is. It's collecting all the data from all the meters that are in its proximity. And there are different versions of these. There's different sort of network models for doing this, point-to-point versus mesh. Don't worry about it. But they're designed to sort of build on redundancy and improve the overall the number of meters that are being captured. So the first option is the district buys the hardware themselves, and then it's theirs. They don't have to pay anybody for the costs of the data. It's their system. They're managing it. There's still like software licensing and things like that, but essentially it's owned by the district. Now the second option is to pay a cellular service provider rather than build your own system. So it works the same way as a text message, essentially. And you don't have to put any hardware in place. You're using the same towers that we're all using right now with our cell phones. They're using these carriers. It'll be the it'll be the meter service provider, Census, Badger, whatever. But it's essentially they've licensed to these carriers to do it for them. So the district doesn't have to handle maintenance, doesn't have to worry about software updates or anything like that. It's a service. It's paid for. And so when we look at these two technologies, we've got the meters themselves and the registers, and then we've got the meter reading platform. We're going to apply a consistent methodology to evaluate each of them so that we're comparing apples to apples to really understand the trade-offs to switching to advanced meter infrastructure, stick with drive-by, stick with touch, understand what the trade-offs are in terms of the hardware costs, the software that's required. CitrusSites is already using a software platform associated with its data, the meter data it's collecting. The equipment that's required. So there's equipment required for the vehicles. It has to have the equipment in it that collects the data. You can need to put those collectors. The touch meter reading there's this hardware that's associated with it. There's labor in various forms, whether it's collecting data, whether it's doing operations and maintenance, whether it's looking at the data, managing the data, all sorts of different needs. There's the cost of managing data, which everyone is already faced with. And then there's the differing operations and maintenance required based on the different systems. So we'll organize all of the different options into sort of organize in this way and look to see which one has the best payoff. There's also benefits, so outside of cost efficiency. First of all, so water efficiency. There's water efficiency benefits to advanced meter reading, meter infrastructure. Water efficiency in terms of the ability for customers to have sort of more information at their disposal about their habits and their patterns. So if I'm getting my bill every 2 months, it might be difficult for me to catch the trends. Now, I was using if I can see sort of my water use in a smaller basis, like daily basis, maybe even smaller than that, and say, oh yeah, what was I doing on Saturday? Why did I use all that water? And that's something that you're able to do if you have more access to data. Improve leak detection. So it's possible for leak detection to happen, for the district to identify leaks now on a bi-monthly basis, but with more frequent data collection, it's possible to detect smaller leaks. And so that's a potential advantage. Enhanced customer service. So it's when there's questions about bills or just questions about service, wondering, why was it this, why was it that? There's an ease to collecting data. It's much easier to look at the data because it's all available and organized. So that's a potential benefit. And then there's potential cost savings just from automating the system and sort of the efficiencies that are gained by streamlining things. Right, so one of the interesting and unique things about this study is that since there's all these players at the table and they're all at different levels, some of the agencies like City of Sacramento have a fully deployed advanced meter system. Some are partially deployed. Some use half of their service area uses one technology. So Sac Suburban has half cellular coverage and half fixed network coverage. There's all sorts of flavors. And there's all sorts of lessons learned. A lot of the agencies that have put this technology in have learned hard lessons. And what's really nice is that in this group, which David and Rebecca and Hillary and the rest are a part of, as they're weighing their options and what's best for this district, they're able to hear these lessons learned. And one of the really exciting things is that there's opportunities to collaborate. So there's opportunities through joint purchasing to gain efficiencies of scale, to get really good pricing by purchasing at quantity. There's opportunities to share hardware. So for example, it could be that a tower that's already in place could cover more than one service area. CitrusSites could take advantage of a tower that's up and owned by Sac Suburban, for example. So there's some opportunities for proximal sharing, and then there's joint servicing, so getting competitive pricing for things like meter reading or operation and maintenance service, testing services. These are all opportunities that are available because these agencies are working very closely together and are thinking about opportunities to have more cost efficient and also more consistent systems. Everybody's testing meters the same way. Everybody's doing their servicing the same way. They're learning lessons from each other.
I really see the value in this consortium for being able to verify a circumstance that repeats itself often with problems. It's not something that we can just say that we've experienced problems with this particular device or system. Being able to say also that your neighboring comrades or whatever have experienced that same sort of problem gives you a lot more credibility when you're saying that has a problem.
Yeah, that's really true, and it's really nice. And I love that the agencies are all sort of at different places. So you've got like the elder statesmen, like City of Sacramento, that have just kind of been doing it for a while and learned lessons, and then you've got others that are just starting to deploy networks. So it creates a really great dynamic where everybody's kind of learning, and it's pretty cool to see from the outside.
So how about get back in your group? If you have any other questions about this part of the presentation, if you would put those on Post-it notes, we'll gather those and then we'll take a break. So how about 5 minutes for questions? Unless you have none, you could start your break now. But we'll do a 15-minute break, then we'll come back and we'll hear answers to the questions.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome back. So let's start from the left side here. Rebecca, can you take this first question, please?
Sure. So the question is, will different styles of meters work better at controlling leaks? And the answer to that is no. The technology of the meter will not allow us to control a leak any better. I mean, the meter won't control the leak at all, but in order to detect the meter, it depends on like potentially the frequency of when the meter is read. For example, if it's reading the data every 15 minutes, then you're going to find a leak much faster than every 2 months.
That would be the style of the meter, correct?
Yes, and the meter technology. Yeah.
So a different technology would be able to give us a better read on basically the function of the pipe, whether or not it was intact or whether there was a leak. I thought that was a benefit of doing newer things so you'd be able to track and catch leaks sooner rather than later.
I'm going to let Eric talk about this one just a little bit more.
Yeah. So what we're talking about here is the frequency of read. So the meter itself, whether it's mechanical or non-mechanical, is constantly recording flow. The counter's just clicking away, right? It's the frequency of read. So if you're looking at a 15-minute interval, so it takes a reading, and then 15 minutes later, another reading is sent to Database Central, and then 15 minutes later, it's the frequency. If the frequency is smaller, 15 minutes versus an hour versus a day versus a month, the longer the interval, the more difficult it is to see a leak. So leak detection, it becomes much more accurate at smaller levels as the interval increases. So it's the meter reading technology or the frequency of read that matters, not necessarily like the type of meter that it is. Yeah.
So this is a two-part question. Number one, can meters be repaired? And the answer is yes, but we don't really practice that with 1 inch. And the reason being is that there's not really failure of the meter. And if that mechanical portion fails, it's better just to replace the meter. There's bigger cost benefit to us if we're going out there already, just replace the meter itself. Now the register, which was shown in that picture that goes on top of the meters that we have now, those will actually fail more often than a meter. Right now we're not getting failures of meters, of the 1 inch meters, but the registers are what's failing. And so it takes about 10 seconds to replace those. So you just unscrew it and screw it back on and take the numbers down and give that to the front office, and that's changed out. However, there is a cost to that. So part of this study is to analyze that replacement of that portion of the infrastructure and looking at, is it beneficial to possibly, through this joint purchasing that we're talking about with the consortium, is it better just to replace the entire meter rather than just this register? Because there is a man hour, there is a cost of our truck going out there, and then having to do this potentially 15 years down the road again for the entire meter. Second part of the question is how much, going back, large meters, absolutely, we repair and replace that, sections of those, because it's very easy to repair those, and it's very expensive to replace, say for instance, a 8-inch water meter that costs $20,000. It's better to repair some of the guts inside of those meters. Number two, how much will enhanced IT for non-mechanical meters cost? So this is really where the study comes into play. Is what is the IT? What is the cost of extra IT to put in this type of infrastructure? And we don't really know that at this time. Some of the consortium agencies have some cost data that they are providing, so we can use their data to help look at what that is and how much IT personnel does it take to actually fully run and implement a system and troubleshoot certain things of a meter program, for this automated system. So we will definitely be analyzing all of that.
We have a two-part question here. How many touch read meters do we have at the district? About 18,700 of our meters are touch read. They're the oldest of our meters. Some of them were put back in 98, all the way up to about 2007. And drive-by meters, we have about 1,300. They started putting those in 2005 in the difficult to read spots, the one where the meters were in the backyards or blocked by something.
Okay. The question is, what is failure rate of touch read versus drive-by? That's kind of a two-part question. The failure rate of a meter is much different than, let's say, the register. So our meters are workhorses, the positive displacement ones, which are the 1-inch we've been talking about. Really less than 1% of those meters are failing. We rarely physically replace a positive displacement meter. What we do have to replace are the registers. We do spend some of our time going back out there, say when we get a zero read or something, and replace the registers. We're finding that those are about 1% or so we're seeing that are failing and need replacing.
Okay, digital and physical security of collected data. And this is specific to who can shut me off. So what the consortium has talked to Harris about is that we don't want to analyze the meters that we can actually have two-way conversations with that meter to shut them off remotely. That's it's unproven technology. It is available, but it's not proven yet. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong with a system like that. Currently, somebody could come by and tamper with somebody's meter. That's happened. We deal with that. But in the event that we cannot have a two-way conversation with those meters from the office, and that's not really what we're looking at for this next technology.
Yeah, and I just would say thank you. I think, at least within our group of people over here, that's greatly preferred. It seems impossible to have physical and digital security over that kind of capability. So just not having that capability, great.
Okay, balance the costs of workers to manually read versus wireless/robot read. So again, this unfortunately is one that we can't really answer today because it is part of what the study will be looking at, but there are definitely different factors to consider when you're talking about looking at the costs of, obviously, if you're contracting with meter readers or even have in-house meter readers, there's staffing costs that go along with that. There are vehicle costs and transportation costs. If you've got a wireless read, you've got the software costs. In the case of the system where you're buying all of that infrastructure that you would then own, you'd have an initial pretty large startup cost, and then maybe your annual cost would be cheaper after that, now that you own the infrastructure. Whereas if you went to a cellular network, like Eric was talking about earlier, maybe your cost would be less because you're using those cell towers, but you'd still have to kind of like, rent that space and pay for annual maintenance contracts for software. So again, hard one to answer, but the study will hopefully give us some more insight into that in the next phases.
Right, and I think that ours was just like, maybe that's an important distinction to make when, showing this to others, is that maybe is an angle that people don't initially think of, that there is a cost to having a human being do it. Is that cost similar or whatever to a robot or something like that? So maybe when making that comparison, it makes it a little bit more realistic.
So in thinking about how you outreach with information, that's an important one. Okay.
All right, the next question says, or this is more of a comment, the analytics in the portal need to be simple and practical. Customers may not see the value of this spending on the portal. So we have seen a few different portals when we've looked at different software options. And again, as a result of the study, we might not do anything at all. And we might not get a fancier, smarter meter fleet with a portal. We might stay with what we're doing for several years. We just don't know yet. But the portals that I have seen, the nice thing about them is that they are very simple and easy to understand. When you log in, they have just very simple charts of usage and different. Just you can customize it how you would like it. So if you want to get into more detailed analytics, if you love numbers and you want to see all of those charts and your history of use and things like that, you can. And if you don't, you just want to log in and pay your bill and do things like that, that's also an option. But again, the ones we have seen are very, they seem easy to understand, and they have a lot of those basic features that I think the customers would appreciate if we ended up going down that route in the future.
Can mechanical and new technology be combined? And how flexible are meters for new tech? So what we have right now, as Kelly mentioned, is that we're kind of in a transition of going from touch read and replacing registers with radio read. And that's just because that technology is available. However, that we are combining this positive displacement or mechanical meter with a combination of this new technology where we have drive-by. The interesting thing about these drive-by registers that we are putting in place is that they actually do have the capability of automated reading. So there is the possibility that we can implement that without actually having to go out and change the register for those ones. And so that's kind of goes back to the flexibility discussion on this question too, is that there is flexibility with all of our meters. So if we get a service request for a misread or a non-read, for instance, we're able to go out there and have several different types of platforms to possibly read that meter. And last but not least being the actual physical manual read that's archaic that we did how many years ago, Eric? We still do that today.
What is the time frame to have water meters replaced? Technology continues to advance and change. This is definitely true. So this is actually one of the key questions for the study. And it's very similar to the 2030 question, which is you've got infrastructure that's aging, in this case meters, and they've been deployed across a range of years. There's kind of a bell curve starting in around 2000. So as these meters age, there's going to be a higher and higher possibility that they'll fail over time as they age. So the question is, what is the right timing for replacing meters? And obviously it's like anything, you want to replace it the day before it fails, right? That's the goal. So there's all sorts of elements of the study that are going to help the district answer this question. The meter testing methodology is going to help them understand, to try and hone the answer to that question. And of course, you want to replace it right before it fails, but you also don't want to have to replace all of them at the same time, because that's really difficult. So asset management is about balancing the first question with trying to make it as smooth of a plan as possible. So we're going to be trying to answer this question through the studies, and we'll report back to you later.
On non-mechanical meters, what kind of battery does it use? The only batteries that are being used right now are the batteries being used currently are lithium-ion batteries. They're estimated at 10 to 20-year life on them. So obviously some new stuff, so it's unproven, but that's what most of the manufacturers are telling us right now.
Yeah. And I think there's another one with it. Okay. And to go along with that is that there are meters and platforms where they're having batteries that are lasting within the consortium. They're lasting 7 years, and there's some agencies that their batteries are lasting 25 plus years. So this is where myself is understanding more about meters by discussing this study with our partners and all these technicians, because we're hearing the unvarnished realities of these meter platforms. So we're really learning a lot from their good, bads, and non-mentionables. Okay, here's a question, and these were all very similar. I think these all came from different groups, but they had very similar ideas on this. Is that on non-mechanical meters, what is the life of a battery? And this, Kelly was just saying that it's, it depends on how often you're reading these meters. So it could be that you're doing that 15-minute because you want to know instantaneously, oh, I got a leak right now. Well, is that really necessary? Because if you're reading it every hour or every day, the warranty is longer, the battery lasts longer, and you will get an idea that there is something going on with your meter. Because as these things move forward, you are using analytics that are going to tell the front office as well as tell you through these portals that you're using a lot more water immediately. Every day it'll say you're having your usage is irregular. So that's how you'll get that. So I'm looking at this battery life as a big, this is a big issue that the consortium is looking at together and seeing what the benefits are of shorter read periods. And right now, I have my eyes wide open to every possibility, but right now I'm looking at, extending that out just a little bit further than what some leak detection agencies might want of a 15-minute. Yes. Feel free to always interrupt with a question.
So on the smart registers, do any of them have the capability of switching the read frequency from a day to 15 minutes and then back if you've got a problem child out there?
Yeah. But we would most likely switch every register. So I don't think that we would custom make that individual person's, which would be a big task to have 20,000 individual customer reading scenarios, rather than this is how your reading platform's coming in and this is how it's working into our server. Because I think that would be a tall task, because it's a lot of data coming in and separating that out. Now, I'm not an IT person, so I can't be for sure on that one, but I'm just taking a guess that you would want it one way. Okay, so here is the other question that was very similar, is different shelf life for meters. It's very similar. It's all, these mechanical versus non-mechanical meters. There's battery issues with them. You know, we talked about that some of our meters are 22 years old and they're still measuring, you know, at this 100% range. So, you know, really what is the shelf life? You know, we're still analyzing that. We have very, very clean water coming through our system, thankfully from Folsom Lake, and very clean groundwater supply as well. The other thing that has to deal with meter failure, you know, going back to your comment about usage, is that throughput does have an impact on age. And much like a car, you either have age or mileage. It's the same thing with the meter. So there is another agency in the consortium that has very large properties, and they're starting to get failures on their meters because of the throughput going through there. The amount of volume that they have is twice what our meters are. And so they're starting to get that failures due to, you know, that really hard-driven meter day in, day out usage. Another question is, what is the battery life currently and projected? You know, it's the million-dollar question. So we hope to find that answer out in the study. I think hopefully with new technologies, you know, every day that they're discovering new battery techniques, so that way these things can last longer. I think that we're seeing them, you know, throughout different types of the industry, you know, with all these, you know, with cars, where the batteries are lasting, you know, that they're able to drive further, longer distances. So who knows? Hopefully, you know, I'm hopeful that they will be able to last longer, but is this the right way for us to go? It's yet to be determined.
What is current water loss in the district and the probable goal of water loss? Okay, so water loss simply is water into our system and the water delivered to our customers. So we have some master meters that we, when we purchase water, we measure that water into our system so we know how much we're delivering and have in the system available. And then we have the customer meters, and those are the ones that y'all see in your yards. And we can match water coming in versus water going out of the system. In between all of that, there's a lot of different factors involved in where the water can go to. Some we know about and some we may not ever know because we don't see it. So what is the current water loss rate? It's about 7 to 8% right now, which is a good number, quite strong in my opinion. And that's actually many districts' goals is 7 to 8%. Under 10% is you're safe, considering when you read AWWA standards, anything over 10% deserves a deeper dive into where that water is going, whether it's meter accuracies that might be diminishing, or leaks that you don't see, that don't come to surface right away, and we lose a lot of water. So there's variable factors over there, but overall the bottom line is it's about 7 to 8%. I'm back. What is the benefit or selling point for the customer, not CHWD? I'm assuming this is for the newer technologies.
Yeah, we were kind of sitting here discussing tonight the benefits that we've seen benefiting the water district tonight in the presentation, and we're wondering how that may be flipped a little bit to the benefits for the customer.
Sure. And data, you know, you could have data overload with these newer technologies. You can check your meter quite regularly to find if you have high usage and you don't think you're using water, or you find out you have high usage over the weekend. Say if you go on a trip and you say you weren't home, well, your automatic sprinklers might have gone on, and maybe there was a broken head that caused a very high flow. That can be flagged with these newer analytics. And there's parameters that you could set for leak notifications and stuff like that. So really it's the accessibility to data rather than a customer walking down the street sees a broken pipe, let's say, early in the morning, yet the homeowner doesn't see that, that customer that sees the leak will call us, we'll go out there and investigate. That's quite a bit of time that we spend going out manually to discover what's actually going on. Whereas if you've got that information available, you could pull it up and do a little analytics on it and see that you had a high flow at, let's say, 3 a.m. for about 20 minutes because your sprinkler head was broken or something like that. That's a really good example. So that's one of the main selling points for the customer. And Mr. Drake.
What percentage of Heights meters were tested? Two-part question. The larger meters, 3-inch and above, we tested about 75% of our meters. The 1-inch and below, we tested less than 1%. Obviously, we have, the biggest number of 1-inch meters, so it takes a lot more to test those. But the most of the water goes through the larger meters, and they're the ones that you want to catch before they get too low of accuracy.
Yeah, we were curious where you're at, and we thought about 1% or 2% was very ambitious in the number that you did test.
All right. My question here is, you guys have been talking about the battery a lot, right, in that part. What is the possibility of where, like, new houses being built or something that, like, the pools and everything else, you have an outdoor outlet? Why? How can they might put an outlet out right next to the water meter, where instead of it being a battery, you've got electricity right there with it? And would that be a possibility, or is that just too much of a weird question?
That was a good question. And, you saw the graphic that Rebecca showed earlier where it shows the demarcation point of where our meter currently is. Most, I'm not going to say all, but most water agencies have that water meter located out by the street because we do not have easement rights to go all the way up to the house. There's also a liability issue of having a meter all the way up to the house where there's, as Rebecca stated, we have found customers tying in to our water services before the meter. So there's a theft issue that's possible for having that meter really far back. And as far as running electricity to it, some smart meter technology people at conferences will always approach you and say this, to do that. But really, I don't know any agency that's actually doing that and changing all their meters from from where they're located currently to the back. It's something to always look at, especially like in apartment complexes or something or condo units where they're really up right against the street. That's a possibility. But switching over to a different type of meter platform would probably be tough. But it's something we should always be looking at. And I think and I can say this for our team, is we're always looking for the next technology of just looking at it and analyzing. I think part of the benefits of working with this consortium is that everybody's piloting different types of meters on a daily basis. So it might be something that somebody does pilot within our group and be able to share. So this is, information sharing, if anything, coming from this study as a consortium is really, one of the biggest benefits that we're already seeing, and myself included, is that I'm learning a heck of a lot from all of these other technical folks from these other water agencies through just their pilot work and saying, does this work or does it not work?
One of my questions was, will the warranty offers from each of the suppliers be a factor in the consideration of what meter you ultimately go with?
Absolutely. That is one of the number one factors of what we look at. And, everyone offers a different warranty, based off of how often it's read And so that is, I think that with the strength of numbers too, with us maybe doing joint purchasing, that we can maybe get better warranties together. So we're going to look at that a lot, and I know that agencies currently are looking at that. I know we are with our current meters. Is that's number one topic.
Do the solid state meters also have a register, or are they one unit?
They are both together, so it's a combined. So the solid state being the non-mechanical meter, they're together because it's using the electrical current to produce the sound or electrical current to measure the flow rate. So it's using a combination of that. And so the question is by it using electrical current to measure the flow, is that making the battery fail sooner? And so the answer so far is yes. But the meter is actually cheaper. So it's something that we're going to be working with Harris to look at that analytics of, is that more efficient use of our dollars, or is it not?
You mean the registers are more expensive than the meter?
No, since they're 2 in 1,
What we have
replace.
now, mechanical ones.
Oh, so our mechanical meters, no, they're separate.
But what costs more, the register or the meters?
The meter. But if we were out currently, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, but the meter with the register for a mechanical meter is more expensive than a non-mechanical meter that has a register built onto it.
So you're weighing all these factors against each other. Okay.
So how much does it cost then? You could, quote, repair the new one that's a one piece. You wouldn't have, either if it fails, you have to take the whole thing out, or you just replace the battery, right?
You can't replace the battery. So you just
Why
have
not? I mean, everything else, I should think with your buying power, the big thing to come up with is the new fancy meter we will buy has a replaceable battery so that our customers are really getting a decent deal. I mean, you can get your battery in your watch if you still wear one. Everything. I mean, pop it out, put another one in. And you said that that's the only thing that fails on that in general.
Yeah, and that was my first question when
Something
I started
like printers
getting into
and
meters.
ink, huh?
That was my first question getting into meters. How come you can't just replace the battery? And I think that they're doing that on purpose, so that way you have to buy a whole new meter.
So you don't have to buy them.
But it's every manufacturer does that, right?
Yeah, I'm sensitive to
algorithm
the
that's
use
required
of batteries in our
just to
environment,
read.
and so
You can't cut any wires and you can't change anything in the as far as the meter. It would disrupt the algorithm that the meter uses to figure out the flow of the meter.
They don't have very smart IT guys, do they?
So are there any other questions? We want to thank you for all the questions, and as you saw, you've got some answers tonight, and some of the questions are part of the study, and so all of these will be captured in the summary for tonight's meeting, and will be used by the district in sharing those questions as part of the study. So let's give a hand and say thanks for the answers. And thanks to you for the questions. So, how does Citrus Heights move forward? How does the district move forward? And so that is the next step, and then we will start to wrap up.
So in closing, and seeing what we're doing on the next steps, I'm bringing back this building blocks display here, and you can see that phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3 are really the foundation now to go into all the analytics to what does the district do or what does the consortium do together or individually moving forward. And there's a lot that we're learning right now. There's still a lot of information that we're gathering. And we're going to be sharing more information with you at the next CAC meeting, so that way we can all make an informed decision on the phase 4 of the implementation, what we're going to do, and then how to fund it. So those are very important questions that we really need to hone in on, but we really have to have the data to tell us what to do, right? So the Harris team with Emmy Simpson is really working with, Emmy Simpson is the nationwide guru consultant for meter testing. They are part of the group that spends a lot of time on analyzing when and how meters should be tested to assess the age, value, and really look at all the components of, when you're looking at replacement for these meters, and developing performance curves for each batch of your installs over these years. And so that's what we're really looking at, is getting a sense of the, as I mentioned earlier, is that what is the health of every batch of meters that went in for the district. And we can put a unit on that every time we go out and test, and we're checking it out. And then we can kind of use that for a tool, not just for the study, but for the program itself moving forward. Every year we are updating that information, so that way we can have informed decision based off of data and the different components going into it. How will the replacements happen? So the funding strategy, as I mentioned, we need to look at that. So during the fall, we're going to really concentrate, much like in 2030, is looking at what to do and how to fund it. So I look forward to that portion of this study and working alongside you on that. I was really pleased with being able to participate with you in Project 2030's portion of this. And, so thank you.
So the next steps are that the next CAC meeting has been scheduled for June 3rd. And so hope you will put that on your calendar, and you'll then see all of the results that will have taken place by then. We'd like to just hear from you as to what you're taking away from tonight, something you've learned, or just any general takeaway. We'll go around and hear from everyone, and we'll let Jenna go last, and then she can wrap us up. So how about if we start on that side?
Okay, I'm Suzanne Guthrie. I'm a residential customer, and it is, as usual, quite interesting, and enjoy learning more, and haven't sold me on needing new meters, actually, so keep going.
I'm Mike Nishimura. I'm commercial for representing Sunrise Marketplace, and I'm also a resident. And I'm just anxious to see the cost, the shelf life, and, what the maintenance is going to cost us. That's going to be the big factor.
I'm Ray Bulkey, residential, and I just want to thank all the experts for presenting and kind of explaining all the complexities of what you would think is something rather simple. Like the water main replacement, it's not simple. So thank you.
I'm Michael Goebel, residential also. I think we all have a good understanding now of how the meters work. It'll be real interesting to see the study information more than anything, see how the numbers work out.
I'm Alan Etzig, residential also. I've really enjoyed these meetings, learning more about the water district and the plans ahead, and I look forward to learning more about it.
I'm Kimberly Berg. I own Citrus Heights Car Wash, and I also represent the Auburn Boulevard Business Association. And I'm learning a lot about the water meters, and I really appreciate you guys kind of bringing it down to our level and explaining, helping us understand our questions and giving us a really thorough answers and explaining it kind of in layman terms so I could understand it. So I'm learning a lot, and look forward to hearing more about the test results from the consortium.
I'm Jim Monteaton, residential. The one thing that I'd take away tonight is the fact that you said you may not change these meters. You may actually find out that this is going to go for a few more years. I like that thinking. I like the flexibility there, that you haven't set this thing in stone, and you're really going to work through all the numbers. And because it's going to be, once again, it's another push at telling the customer why he's going to get something that he knows he's going to spend more money for. And with 2030 hanging over them, this is going to be just another project that it's going to be hard to sell. So it's good that you're thinking that this may not go, that it may not be needed, that it may be something that you can modify and do some other plans. So that I enjoyed that part of it.
Well, I'm Rick Moses, and I'm also residential, and basically I can't add any more than what everybody else has put in here. Those were what I was thinking too. So I'll just stop there.
I definitely came in, my name's Jenna Moser, I'm a resident of Citrus Heights. I came into the meeting tonight expecting much scarier, gridded worksheets of like check boxes across lots of stuff. You guys really made it simple and didn't give me any of those worksheet terrors or whatever, so that's appreciated. More visual information and more maps. I would appreciate that in your presentation, but you guys did a great job tonight. Thank you. It's 8:46, and at this time, I'll give an opportunity for anyone in the audience to speak. I don't see anyone, so I'll close the hearing at 8:46. Great, thanks, guys. We'll be back here June 3rd, and I'm sure you'll get a call from Madeline. Thank you.